Welcome back to Arsenal and our tour of the Stridsvagn 74. And as usual with part 2, we're looking at the crew positions. Starting off in the commander's cupola, which looks actually kind of suspiciously Centurion-like, but there's a reason for that. He does have a machine gun on a mounting to his front. This is an 8mm, however, later on it got converted to the more modern 7.62. The machine gun mount is actually spring-loaded, so if you want to shoot at close-range targets, you have it aimed forward, and if you want to shoot at something a little bit higher up, that's about as high up as you can go. So we'll leave it out of the way for now, and hop down inside and see what the inside of this big turret is like. So coming inside the cupola, and this is definitely a vast improvement over the earlier turret on this vehicle. It is a rotating cupola, and directly to my front is Binocular Periscopic Armored Fighting Vehicle number 4 Mark I. A substantially British sounding title, and indeed the binocular is pretty much what you would find on a Centurion. Around me are 8 periscopes that are used to see with pretty good visibility. They come with little shutters, so at night if you don't want to emit any light and for some reason you don't want to see out, you can close the shutters and you are hiding in secret. There is a marker up here that says that this turret is number 32, built by Landsverk in 1960. Over his shoulder, to the left is the radio behind the loader, to the right, the controls for the auxiliary motor. That's the Volkswagen in the back of the bustle. To his right, you're going to find another controller marked with a Ministry of Defense plate. It is the commander's override for the turret, and again, taken right off of a Centurion. Further forward, we have helpfully labeled in English, smoke discharger firing buttons. I wonder what they might do. This is all a matter of just trying to keep the parts simple, and obviously they liked what they saw in the Centurion, and they took as many of the Centurion components as possible and put them in the turret. I am sitting on top of a huge coil spring. You can see the cable comes forward up to a winch here and then down forward to the gun. The purpose of this spring is to equilibrate the length of the much larger gun, which is mounted further forward simply to save space. I'm happy enough with this position. Let's go forward and see if the gunner, well, sure, he can't be any worse than the one previous to him. Now, for those of you who saw what it was like in the M42's original gunner seat, this is a dramatic improvement. So the designers actually sorted themselves out with this one. Again, everything is British. Right in front of me, I have sight periscopic AFV number 22 Mark I. It is connected, though, to a Swedish ballistic drive, but the idea works very similarly. You simply select the range that you want, place it on the scale, it adjusts the elevation of the periscopic sight accordingly. You simply lay the point on target and engage. Power traverse is conducted by another of the British traverse systems. To his front, he has a manual traverse. You have to kind of push down to engage and push a button to disengage. Elevation is manual, left-hand side, and there is a trigger for electrical firing on the elevation handle. There is also for indirect fire another British issue gunner's quadrant. Now, the purpose, of course, of the entire upgrade was the gun. The gun is a pre-war 7.5 centimeter Bofors. Now, if you want to know how good this gun was, take a look at a photograph of the 7.5 and then compare it with a photograph of the German 8.8, and you will see that the Germans basically took the Swedish design. In order to get it to fit in the tank, though, they still needed to cut off the length down to 56 calibers. They had to install a new recoil system and a couple of other tweaks just to get it to fit. It could fire armor-piercing and saber rounds. The saber round had a muzzle velocity of approximately 1150 meters per second and will penetrate somewhere around 195 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. The periscopic sight is the kind that I like. You have the Unity sight with a field of vision circle, which you know what you will see when you come down to the magnified telescopic sight, and the crosshair itself is simple, no muss, no fuss. You're not going to get confused. Just place the middle on target, fire, and if you set your range correctly, you should be good. On a matter of elevation, elevation and depression was plus and minus 15. I don't know what it is about Swedish vehicles, but they really like having good depression. Minus 15 is pretty good. Last thing I'll say before going over to the loader side is that the engineers have done very well on this. Bearing in mind that they are still constrained by the original small turret ring, and that itself was constrained by the requirement for a narrow tank to keep the weight down. So the fact that the TC and the commander can be front and back inside this small turret ring, and reasonably comfortably, they did very well. So that said, I'm going to hop over to the loader side. Now the loader kind of gets the small end of the stick with the narrow turret ring, but it's not all bad. He does have his own spring-loaded hatch for starters. Looking forward, he's got a periscope. It is adjustable in elevation, but it is fixed forward. Below that, you can see the mount point for the coaxial machine gun, and the spent casings will go down a chute towards, they retained the disposal system in the hull floor. If you look just to the right on the recoil springs, you can see the internal travel lock. Now on the left-hand side, you can also see 6 of the 45 or so rounds that were in the tank. Now the exact capacity varied depending on what sort of transmission you had, that take up a different amount of space. As you can see, these 7.5 centimeters are far bigger than the little dinky short ones that were in the M42. And you can see that the round is longer than the recoil guard. So you kind of thread it in, and then once you're fed, you can finally give it a good push. There's not very much room to get leverage, but things could be worse. The shell casings do not fit down the ejection chute. So unfortunately, it looks like you have to live with shell casings rattling around until you have time to eject them. Additional stowage can be found, for example, under the feet. He has no seat. Instead, you can hook up a sling from the turret wall here to the breech guard, which you could sit on and ride head out if you're not in combat. Obviously in combat, unhook the sling and we're able to manipulate your rounds. Next up, the driver. So the fourth position, the driver's hole. To get into here, I've had to get out of the turret and come forward in the more traditional manner. There's just not enough room for me to squeeze through the turret ring. It's good news and bad news. The good news is it's still quite comfortable. I am safe from the turret basket behind me because I have a nice backrest and I don't feel in any danger. I guess I should modify that. It's not a full basket, it's only a platform on the gunner commander side. The loader is standing on the hull. If you look to the front, the driver's panel is modernized, and of course it is much bigger than on the M42 we looked at because you got 2 engines. So you got 2 startup buttons, you got oil and coolant for both, of course only the one. Speedometer. Steering is conducted in the same manner. You have the 2 tillers and you have the buttons for the hard brake option. 2 pedals, the brake and the accelerator. To see out of, more good news. He's got 4 periscopes and not just the 2, so he's got better visibility. The bad news, however, is that this modification to the whole system has resulted in there being, well, frankly, it's harder to get in and out of this thing. I'm not entirely sure what they've done, but it is a tighter fit. The gear system. It is the hydraulic system on this tank. There's 4 basic gears. So front left is first, and that is a hydraulic gear. Then you come back to a mechanical gear, which is really more for cruising. That's the low range. On the far right hand side, you've got third and fourth, which are the hydraulic and mechanical gears accordingly. Front middle is reverse. I've been told, and I can't do it right now because the gear stick seems to be frozen, that when you go from a hydraulic gear to a mechanical gear, it's spring-loaded,
and if you're not careful will slam your arm to the rear and you can knock it off something, and it is quite painful and a mistake you don't do very often. Not much else in here. On the right hand side you can see that the ammunition compartment has been modified a little bit to fit the longer ammunition, so it's now angled downwards, doesn't carry as much but it fits. There's a primer pump for the fuel on the left hand side, and well, that's pretty much it. So I shall now extricate myself from this tank, which, as I say, is the driver's position isn't bad for an early 1940s vehicle. And we'll close up.
After having finished the extrication process, I've figured out what the problem was. They've put a stop on here so that the upper visor can't raise high enough to interfere with the traverse of the turret. This of course reduces the amount of space that you have to work with. Of course, on an M42 you have a much higher elevation on the visor unless the turret is directly forwards. So that said, let's close up. I love working on these little vehicles in person. You get to learn all these new details. The SCRV-74 did stay in service until 1984. That was when the last of them was decommissioned, the turret removed and placed in the typical Swedish tradition in the role of coastal fortification. Hope you found the tour illuminating, and as ever, we'll see you on the next one.